For the Thunder as they're about to blast off in round 2 of the Queensland Sports Sedan Championship. 8 laps at Surfers Paradise. On pole position, car 104, Gary Scott in the Bluebird. With him on the front row of the grid, 69, Simon Harrex in a Commodore. And then in 26, John White driving a Monza. 1 minute to go. John English is on the second line, driving a Falcon. Then Vic Cameron, the series leader, car 38, an Escort. Thomas McFarlane in 94, the Falcon. Phil Swinton, 42, a Mini. Bruce Smith in car 13, a Mazda RX-7. Then Ken Nelson, 81, a Mini. And Russell Horton, also in a Mini, car 15. Doug Clark driving a Corolla in 78. 99 is Malcolm Ray, a Capri. And Kevin Kennedy rounds out the top 13, car 27, a Tirana.
Field just about set to go for round 2 of the Queensland Sports Sedan Championship here from Surfers Paradise. Gary Scott sitting on pole in car 104, the Nissan Bluebird. Flag about to go up. It's up. And they get off with one monstrous roar of horsepower off the line. And Scott using the inside. Harrex is there and John White as well. But I think Scott has lost out in the run down to IPEC corner for the first time as Simon Harrex goes through to take over the lead in the much modified Commodore. Look at Scott fighting back. Down the inside he comes towards IPEC and now moves up into second spot.
No pickup at all from Gary Scott off the grid. That was a surprise. But now, once he gets wound up, just look at him go. Goodness gracious me, really flying. Gary Scott in the Nissan Bluebird. Harrex and White both beat him into the first corner, but it didn't take long for Scott to reel them in once he got the Bluebird wound up.
The car that Scott is in is the ex-George Fury car that took pole position at last year's James Hardy 1000, so it's the turbocharged 1.8-litre Bluebird engine, so it takes a little time to get it wound up, but he's going to have to really cover the rear guard here when he lines himself up towards the front part of the course, because Harrex has a 6-litre Chev tucked underneath that Commodore.
These cars really do churn out some horsepower, and there's plenty of space for them to try it out here at Surfers Paradise.
Coming down towards the turn that brings them back onto the straight, and Gary Scott in the Armstrong Bluebird comes out. Harrex now has his big chance here with a lot of horsepower, and here he comes down the outside, and they are side by side, flat to the boards as they come down to the Dunlop Bridge under there, but he's not good enough. Scott still holds the lead in 104 as they head down to IPEC.
IG Harrex will have to be right on his hammer next time they come onto the straight if he's going to get past him at all.
Speed of those 3 cars under the bridge, frightening. Only centimetres apart. But down the back part of the course, heading down to the left-hander, Gary Scott still there. Harrex not too far behind him. They've dropped White off just a touch as they take the left-hander. Scott doing this very, very nicely. But as Neil said before, he'll have to cover his tracks because the Harrex Commodore with a booming V8 puts it all down as they come up the front straight.
About 550 odd brake horsepower, giving let me see, Scott's got a 200 brake horsepower deficit.
Top 3 have broken away from the field a little bit, but we'll get a chance at some stage. You'll see the car that's in 4th place. It's car 14, John English. You might remember is the Falcon that went into the wall at the top of the mountain at Bathurst last October, and in fact is in our 7 Motorsport opener.
That's correct. The old concrete biting special at Bathurst. Once again, Harrex warms it up. And joining them as well, White getting a little bit closer as they come beneath the bridge again. But Scott doing this beautifully.
Oh, look at the car drift through that corner.
Heart in your mouth stuff under the bridge there. And we've already seen one accident there today.
Yes, we've had some inquiries, Mark, about Robin Scorn, whom we saw in the tyre wall at the back of the circuit during the Formula Ford event. And as you could obviously see, he'd been quite seriously hurt, and that has been taken to hospital. And if we have any other detail, we'll pass it on before the end of our telecast.
John White, car number 26. First started racing sports sedans back in '78 and has just installed a new engine in this car and has made a few modifications to the front of it. Does all of his racing here in Queensland, but claims to be producing around about 600 brake horsepower from the 6-litre Chev engine that he has in this car. And you can see now that he's closing that gap for second placing as we look here at Gary Scott in car 104. A works Nissan driver, looking forward in the latter part of 1985 to driving the new Skyline Group A car. And talking of Group A cars, the man in second position at the moment, Simon Harrex, is building with John Donnelly a new Group A Rover as they challenge one another down the main straight. Once again, Harrex comes out from behind the slipstream of the Bluebird. Couldn't quite pull the manoeuvre off because this car, very nimble, quick through the turns.
Harrex will have to watch himself, though, because John White is just waiting for the opportunity here, and it might be about to present itself.
Thought about having a little nibble there on the inside. Scott using the wide exit off the turn. Harrex closes it up from this point on down to the left-hander. But nowhere does he gain more ground than on the long front straight here at Surfers Paradise.
Slower traffic now. There are only 3 cars really in contention here. He's lost power in 26, John White. He's off on the infield. And out of the race, I was going to say only 3 cars in contention. That takes care of one of them and moves John English up into 3rd spot, but a long way in arrears of Gary Scott and Simon Harrex.
Bad luck indeed for John White, who looked at one stage there like he might have been able to go on with it. Scott, meantime, continues to lead, and I think Harrex possibly is a little closer than he was last time. Back onto the front straight. Now watch the acceleration as Harrex, the booming V8 Commodore, comes up the outside and races Gary Scott. Scott keeps the foot in the bucket all the way, ranges up on a slower car, takes the wide line into the turn. They hose off the slower car, and Scott continues to lead.
Yes, and look at the gap that he pulls down this part of the course. That's a great indication. He pulls out about an extra 7 or 8 car lengths through that part of the course down at IPEC. And although the two of them are fairly even in their weight, obviously the Nissan is turning in very, very well. So as Gary suggested before, that moves John English up into 3rd position in the Ford Falcon, the car which for some strange reason seems to have had an infamous past, because that was the car that Alan Moffat ran back in 1980 under the Federation colours, and it lasted 1 lap and went down in a smoking heap as well.
Oh, gee, this Bluebird really does. It floats, doesn't it, for Gary Scott?
Oh, but it's a buzz to drive under the bridge.
Not for me, thank you.
Very talented driver, Gary Scott. And behind him, Simon Harrex. Once again, coming on the approach now to the corner that brings them onto the start-finishing straight. Now we'll see if Harrex can get into the draft.
3 laps to go.
Looks like Harrex has got a little bit of an understeer problem when he comes onto the main straight, because he's losing a lot of ground there, but now he's got it wound up and gets to within about half a car length of the back left-hand side of Scott's car. But again, the nimble Bluebird pulls away through this part of the course and underneath the bridge.
It was a tricky manoeuvre for Scott. Car move, so he had to just change line gingerly, but he manages to still contain Harrex out of IPEC corner, and they work the back part of the course again.
That's where it becomes tricky in these cars and at these speeds, isn't it? Halfway through a corner like that, coming out under the bridge, and you have to change your line ever so slightly.
Yes, and we went round the circuit this morning, as you recall, and you only have to get about 3 or 4 feet off the drive line, and the amount of dust and rubble and marbles from the tyres of these cars at that high-speed part of the course would put you in a very bad situation.
Simon Harrex comes up on one of the slower cars, number 77, Gary McGrath, in the Mazda Capella, and he drops back onto the tail again of Gary Scott. Scott is doing this very nicely in the slower traffic. Just look at the speed difference there. Little flutter there that time from Harrex. And they're back onto the straight with about 3 laps remaining.
I don't want to ask you. Well, the last lap board's just going out. That can't be right.
Well, the race was shortened, the signal, but here comes Harrex with his big move down the outside. Tries to feint it on the outside, but he's going nowhere but to sit on the tail of Gary Scott's Nissan Turbo as they head down to the right-hander at IPEC.
No, he thought about it, and then he pulled the last lap board back in again. So I think it'll go out next time round.
We're taking bets, are we?
I don't want to ask a silly question, but has anybody seen Vic Cameron? The man that won the first round of this series. He's been blown away in the smoke right off the starting grid and hasn't been seen again. These two have had the race for themselves ever since John White went out, and as I said, the last lap board will go out this time round. So it's a lap and a bit remaining at the moment for Gary Scott. Can he stall Simon Harrex for that much longer? He's managed to do so quite successfully thus far in the race. half car length. That is about as close as Harrex has got since Scott assumed command down the back straight the first time.
Harrex has thrown everything at Scott. Ranged up to him on the outside, coming down to the right-hander under Dunlop. Probably took his breath away for a second or so. And this is his last real shot. He's moving to the inside, you can see, trying to set Scott up for a pass, and might do it. Gets down, they are side by side, heading into the turn, but Scott on the outside nips him again. Dear me.
It's brave.
And they are coming up on a wall of slower cars. If Harrex can just get himself buttoned on the tail here of Gary Scott.
It's getting dark out there, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
It certainly is.
And look at that traffic, as Mike suggested. Threading your way through here in a 500 brake horsepower car is going to be fun.
On the last lap, and the toughest lap where traffic is concerned. Hard on the brakes, Scott ducking under one of those cars. Harrex following him through.
Well, I think he's picked it very nicely, because he's managed to increase that gap now by another 2 or 3 car lengths with the advantage of the traffic. Harrex is second in the championship after the first round at Lakeside, has 9 points, so he'll consolidate his position in the championship after this second round. He'll pick up another 9 and give him 18. Gary Scott didn't run in the first round. I tell you what, he didn't run too cleanly through that corner either, as he went through the left-hander and up over the ripple strip, forcing his way through on the traffic as he comes out of the right-hander at Bars Leaks, and lining himself up for a run for the final time along the Surfers Paradise International Straight with a very handy gap. We hope for the final time, of course.
Yes, the checkered flag's there.
Get on you, Tiger. Check her out. And what a great victory to Gary Scott. Terrific race, that second round. Scott, the winner in the Bluebird. Second placing going to Harrex in the Commodore. And third to English in the Falcon.